I stood in the dimly lit hallway outside the grand ballroom of the Grand Oak Hotel, adjusting my collar, when my son Julian's voice boomed through the speakers inside. "We all know my father worked hard in his day," Julian announced, his voice smooth and laced with theatrical pity. "But the reality is, the world changed, and he couldn't keep up. Poor management, bad investments, senility. He lost every dime. He is completely broke, living off my personal charity. That's why tonight, as the new sole director of Vance Logistics, I am taking full control to save what's left of our family name." A soft hum of sympathetic murmurs filled the ballroom. 50 of our city's most influential business leaders, bank executives, and longtime family friends were nodding, looking down at their dinner plates. I stood there in my worn, neat, dark suit, holding my breath. My own 35-year-old son, whom I had raised, funded, and protected, had just stood up in front of the entire community and declared me a pathetic, destitute old man to justify pushing me into the dark. I stepped back into the shadows near the entrance, my hand trembling slightly against the cool wallpaper. But beneath the stinging grief of betrayal, a cold, quiet fire began to ignite. Julian didn't know I was standing in the hall, and, more importantly, he didn't know the truth about the legal restructuring papers he had signed 6 months ago. 3 months before that night, Julian approached me in my home office with a look of deep, dutiful concern. He brought a box of organic tea, sat across from my oak desk, and spoke in the softest, most loving tone imaginable. "Dad," he had said, placing a gentle hand over mine, "you've been looking so tired lately. The stress from the fuel price hikes is taking a toll on your blood pressure. You built this company, but you deserve to enjoy your retirement. Let me handle the daily operations as managing director. You can step back, relax, and just be a grandfather." At the time, my heart swelled with pride. I thought my son was stepping up to relieve my burdens out of genuine filial love. I agreed to hand over operational management. I stepped out of the corner office, moved my personal belongings home, and let Julian take the spotlight. Within weeks, however, subtle red flags began to appear. My longtime operational manager, Marcus, a man who had worked alongside me for 25 years, called me late one evening. "Arthur," Marcus said, his voice hesitant and tense, "Julian just issued an internal memo locking your executive access to the company financial portal. He told accounting that you were retiring fully due to health complications and shouldn't be bothered with financial reports." "Health complications?" I repeated, stunned. "I had a minor bout of flu last month. I'm completely fine." "I know that, Arthur," Marcus sighed. "But Julian is taking total control of the banking authorization keys, and he's bringing in a new team of outside auditors." I felt a subtle knot tighten in my stomach. The next day, I drove down to the main headquarters. When I walked through the glass doors of the building I had paid for with decades of labor, the young receptionist looked at me with an expression of awkward pity. "Mr. Vance," she stammered softly. "Julian said, well, he left instructions that if you came by, we were to direct you straight to his office. He said you might get confused about where your new desk is." Confused? I knew every brick in that building. I had laid the cornerstone myself in 1998. I walked into Julian's office without knocking. He was sitting behind my old mahogany desk, wearing a tailored three-piece suit. Beside him sat his wife, Chloe, reviewing a stack of marketing brochures. "Julian," I said, calmly, closing the door behind me, "why was my executive portal access revoked?" Julian stood up immediately, putting on a warm, reassuring smile that felt entirely manufactured. "Dad, what are you doing here? You should be at home resting. Look at you, you look exhausted." "I'm not exhausted, Julian," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I asked you a question." "Dad," Chloe chimed in, her tone sweet yet dripping with condescension. "Julian is just trying to protect you. You've worked your whole life. The board doesn't need to stress you with volatile market reports. We're handling it all, so you don't have to worry." "What board?" I asked, looking between them. "I am the founder and principal shareholder. I haven't called a board meeting." Julian walked around the desk and placed a heavy arm over my shoulder, steering me toward the door with gentle, firm force. "Dad, we're just doing a minor administrative restructuring to streamline decisions. You trust me, don't you, after everything you taught me?" I looked into my son's eyes. I wanted so desperately to see the honest, energetic boy I had taught to fish on Lake Erie. But all I saw was a polished facade, hiding something urgent and desperate. "Of course I trust you, Julian," I said quietly. I left the office that afternoon, but the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. That night, I called my daughter, Vanessa. Vanessa had always been quiet, living in the shadow of her older brother's ambition. She worked as an assistant controller in our corporate accounting department. "Vanessa," I said when she picked up, "are you home?" "Dad?" she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Julian told everyone in the office that if we pass financial files to you, we'll be terminated for violating confidentiality protocols." "Vanessa, what is happening at the company?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Tell me the truth." "Dad, Julian took out a massive $14 million corporate expansion loan 2 months ago," Vanessa confessed, her voice shaking. "He invested it all into a high-risk tech logistics startup managed by Chloe's brother. The startup crashed last week. The entire $14 million is gone." The air left my lungs. $14 million. "The bank is threatening to declare default next month," Vanessa continued, starting to cry. "Julian is terrified. He thinks if people find out, he'll be ruined. Chloe told him the only way out is to convince the bank that you manage the company into bankruptcy, write off the loss under your name, and force a restructuring where Julian emerges as the clean sole owner of a new entity." I sat in my dark living room, holding the phone to my ear, feeling a cold, devastating sorrow wash over me. They weren't just taking my company. They were framing me as an incompetent, senile failure to cover up Julian's reckless greed and hide his catastrophic financial mistake. They were willing to destroy my entire 35-year reputation, the legacy I built for them, just to save Julian's pride. "Dad?" Vanessa whispered nervously. "Please don't tell Julian I told you. He said if I helped you, he'd make sure I was blacklisted from every firm in the city." "I won't tell him, sweetie," I said softly, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you for telling me." The next day, the rumors began spreading through the local business community. I went to my usual hardware store, where I had bought supplies for 30 years. The owner, an old friend named Tom, looked at me with hesitant, sorrowful eyes. "Arthur," Tom said quietly, coming out from behind the counter, "I heard about the company. I'm so sorry, man. Julian told my cousin at the Rotary Club that you lost your savings in an offshore scam, and the business is practically insolvent." "Tom, that's not true," I said, forcing a calm smile. "You don't have to pretend with me, Arthur," Tom said, patting my shoulder sympathetically. "If you need a line of credit for personal groceries, just let me know. You were always good to this town." It was humiliating. Everywhere I went, the diner, the bank, the local lumber yard, people looked at me with soft, pitying eyes. My own son was systematically dismantling my dignity, spreading a false narrative across the city to prepare the ground for his final coup. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was a formal gold-embossed card for the annual regional logistics gala at the Grand Oak Hotel. Julian had organized it, using company funds to host the city's elite. Attached was a small handwritten note from Chloe. "Dad, we reserved a seat for you at the back table. It would look good for family unity if you attended, but please let Julian do the talking. We don't want you getting overwhelmed." They wanted me there as a prop. a quiet, defeated ghost sitting in the corner confirming their lie just by existing. That night before the gala, I called my lifelong legal counsel and closest friend, Frank Miller. Frank had been my personal attorney since 1991. "Frank," I said, sitting at my desk looking at old photos of Julian and Vanessa playing in the yard. "Is the 2018 Master Trust filing still fully active at the state registry?" Frank cleared his throat on the line. "Arthur, it's completely active, sealed, and irrevocable. Why, has Julian tried something?" "He's hosting a gala tonight," I said quietly. "He's about to announce to the whole city that I'm broke, senile, and stripped of authority." There was a long pause on the line. Frank let out a slow, heavy breath. "Arthur, do you want me to bring the original certified state seal filings?" "Yes, Frank," I replied, my voice dropping to an absolute, unyielding calm. "Bring 2 copies and call the senior loan officer at First National Bank, the one handling Julian's expansion loan. Tell him to meet us in the hotel lobby at 8 o'clock. Now, standing in the dark hallway outside the ballroom, I listened as Julian reached the climax of his speech. "And so," Julian shouted into the microphone, his voice echoing with unearned triumph, "to protect our employees and secure our future from past mismanagement, I am officially filing for corporate debt reorganization tonight. Vance Logistics will rise from my father's mistakes under my sole leadership." The room erupted into polite, hesitant applause. Julian beamed, holding up a glass of champagne. Chloe stood beside him, smiling radiantly, while Vanessa sat in her chair, wiping tears from her face. I took a deep breath. I smoothed down my lapels. I stepped out of the shadows, pushed open the double oak doors, and walked down the center aisle of the ballroom. The room gradually fell silent as people noticed me. Head after head turned. Whispers rippled through the tables. "Is that Arthur? Look at him. Poor guy. Julian said he wasn't doing well." Julian spotted me walking toward the stage. His triumphant smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of annoyance. He quickly leaned into the microphone. "Ah, everyone," Julian said smoothly, putting on his patronizing tone. "My father, Arthur, has joined us. Dad, please, take your seat at table 12 near the back. We're almost finished here." I didn't head to table 12. I walked straight up the wooden steps onto the main stage, standing right beside my son. "Dad," Julian whispered furiously under his breath, stepping away from the microphone and leaning close to my ear. "What are you doing? You're making a scene. Get off the stage before you embarrass yourself." I looked at Julian. I looked at his expensive suit, his manicured hair, and the arrogant desperation in his eyes. The heartbreak in my chest quieted down, leaving behind nothing but absolute clarity. "You forgot one detail, Julian," I said, my voice calm and audible to the front row. "What are you talking about?" Julian hissed, his face flushing red. "Security! Can someone help my father down?" Before the hotel security guards could step forward, Frank Miller walked up the stage steps, accompanied by Mr. Vance, the chief managing officer of First National Bank, and 2 uniformed court officers. The room gasped. The quiet murmur turned into total, breathless silence. Frank walked over to the podium, placed a thick black leather folder on the lectern, and adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Frank announced, his authoritative voice cutting through the hall. "As chief legal counsel for the Vance family and Vance Logistics for 34 years, I must correct a severe public misrepresentation made here tonight." Julian stared at Frank, his jaw agape. "Frank, what is this? You don't represent the company anymore. I terminated your retainer last month." "You terminated my retainer for operational affairs, Julian," Frank said coldly, pulling a certified document with a gold state seal from his folder. "But you never held the authority to alter executive control." Julian sneered, stepping up to Frank. "I own 49% of the voting shares. My father holds 51%, and as his legal power of attorney under his health directive, I control his vote."
"You would control his vote, Julian," Frank replied, looking at him with deep professional disgust, "if those shares actually belonged to your father individually." A confused hush fell over the entire audience. Chloe took a step back on the stage, her eyes wide with sudden terror. "In 2018, Frank continued loudly into the microphone, recognizing the risks of future corporate liability and family disputes, Arthur Vance transferred 100% of his voting equity and master holding shares into an irrevocable family legacy master trust." Frank turned the page, pointing to a highlighted section. "Under Section 4B of the State-Sealed Trust Agreement," Frank declared, "Arthur Vance named himself as lifetime sole trustee with absolute veto power. But more importantly, if any beneficiary or family member attempts to publicly misrepresent the financial health of the estate, commit bank fraud, or initiate unauthorized debt restructuring." Frank paused, looking directly at Julian. "The trust covenant automatically revokes all assigned managerial roles, strips all gifted secondary shares, and restores 100% full operational and legal control directly to the founder, Arthur Vance." The entire ballroom erupted into shock. Julian's face drained of every drop of blood. He stumbled back a step, grabbing the edge of the podium for support. What are you talking about? That's impossible. I signed the operational transfer 6 months ago." "You signed an operational proxy, Julian," I spoke up, stepping to the microphone, my voice clear, steady, and ringing throughout the hall. "A proxy that was entirely subordinate to the master trust. You thought I was old, out of touch, and helpless. You thought you could take out a $14 million reckless loan, lose it in a bad venture, and blame your own father to cover your tracks." The chief loan officer from First National Bank stepped forward, looking at Julian with icy professionalism. "Mr. Vance," the loan officer said firmly, "based on the terms of your expansion loan application, you claimed sole ownership authority over Vance Logistics assets as collateral. In light of this master trust disclosure, your loan application constitutes material misrepresentation and financial fraud. The bank is freezing all corporate line access immediately, and our fraud division will be contacting you tomorrow morning at 9.
Chloe let out a sharp, choked gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. Julian looked around the room in absolute horror. The 50 business leaders, bank executives, and friends he had invited to witness his triumph were now staring at him with cold disgust and contempt. "Dad!" Julian whimpered, his arrogant voice collapsing into pathetic, trembling desperation. He fell to his knees right there on the stage, reaching out to grab my hand. "Dad, please! I was just trying to save face. I didn't mean to hurt you. Chloe told me it was the only way. Please, Dad, don't destroy my life. I'm your son." I looked down at my son kneeling at my feet. For months, I had felt the crushing heartbreak of a father betrayed. But looking at him now, not showing remorse for hurting me, but weeping only because his greedy plan had failed, I realized that true dignity isn't held in a company title or a bank account. It is held in truth. "I didn't destroy your life, Julian," I said, my voice quiet, heavy, and full of sorrow. "You traded your family's honor for pride and money. You told everyone I was broke. But the truth is, you were the one who was morally bankrupt." I looked over at Vanessa, who was standing at her table, tears streaming down her face. I offered her a soft, warm smile. She nodded back, a look of immense relief and love washing over her face. I turned away from Julian, walked past Chloe, and stepped down from the stage. Frank, the court officers, and the bank representatives walked alongside me as the entire room parted to let us pass. An hour later, I drove back to my house in the quiet countryside. The rain had stopped and the night sky was clear, filled with stars. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the quiet cabin of my car for a few long moments. I walked up the porch steps, unlocked the front door, and stepped into the warm, quiet hallway. The house was completely still. I walked into my home office, lit the small brass desk lamp, and poured myself a cup of warm tea. Sitting down in my old leather armchair, I looked at the framed photograph on my desk, taken 20 years ago at the opening of our second warehouse. In the photo, a 10-year-old Julian was standing on a wooden crate holding a toy truck, laughing hysterically while I held him steady by the waist. I touched the glass of the frame with my calloused thumb. My company was safe. My legacy was protected, restored, and secured under my name. Vance Logistics would survive, and tomorrow I would begin the hard work of repairing the damage my son had done to our employees and our standing. But as I sat alone in the quiet room, listening to the grandfather clock ticking steadily against the wall, a single tear slipped down my cheek. I had saved the empire I built with my hands. But as I stared at the photo of the little boy on the wooden crate, I knew that no amount of success, contracts, or legal victories could ever repair the quiet, broken heart of a father who realized his son had forgotten what love truly meant.